Thanks, Ellen.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I guess I'll kick it off. Welcome, everybody. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about a couple, like the intersection of a couple working groups, or a couple groups. The first is the Ethics in Ag Data Working Group, which I've been working with for the last couple of years. We're actually working groups typically have like an 18-month lifespan, so we're a little bit past our normal like expiration date, but we're trying to finish up the group relatively shortly. So we'll be talking a little bit about like, the work we've been doing and products that we've been putting out. And then Francis has been probably has been working with the AI group for quite a while, and he can talk maybe a little bit more about like the intersections of the work that that group has been doing as well. Oh, and then we have another member, uh, Ogoshi Ogongwei. Apologies for mispronouncing your name. I should have double checked. Um, we'll be talking a little bit as well about some work that we've been doing. Next slide. Hopefully that works.
Yeah.
Great. I'll talk a little bit about for about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less about like the working group, and then we'll move on to the next portion of the presentation. So the working group um, was created with kind of like out of the IGAD group that was mentioned earlier. It was conceptualized kind of like out of that group. And the original purpose and our general purpose has been to create recommendations that will be adopted by those working with agricultural data. Um, RDA recognized recommendations that will be like broadly adopted, hopefully. And the working group, based on the folks that have been kind of like originally joined the group, and a primary interest of the group has been focusing on smallholder farmers, because we have a lot of experts on like researchers on that group of individuals, and then also we think that they're a group that probably doesn't get emphasized enough. Um, so the group originally started in the winter of 2023. It took us a while and a couple iterations. For those of you unaware of how the RDA process works, the groups have to put together a case statement, submit that to RDA. It might be an iterative process where you have to go back and forth a little bit, and then eventually you'll become a recognized, hopefully you'll become a recognized RDA working group. So our case statement was formally approved in August of 2024. So that's kind of when the working group's uh, work formally started. Um, in the group worked on creating a survey that we pushed out to quite a few individuals, and our survey was released in April of 2025. Um, Also, I'll mention slightly before that, there was a Tiger RDA landscape analysis that was done. So this group's work has been largely helped by Tiger RDA. And that group has been supporting that kind of like part of RDA has been supporting us in a lot of different capacities, including with facilitation help. That component has stopped, and I don't know if RDA plans on continuing kind of that service to working groups. I would highly recommend that they do because it was extremely helpful. We had Brian O'Connor helped us with our group. I learned a lot about facilitation from him, and his like organizational help facilitation help made my job way easier as a co-chair, because made me a lot more able to focus on like the content of the group than the actual like facilitation of the group. So that was great. They also provide as a service, and I think this is a service they continue to provide working groups is some like material support in the form of landscape analyses. So in March of 2025, they produced a landscape analysis that had a lot of valuable information about intersection RDA groups and other groups that were doing kind of similar work, and also kind of like the policy landscape as well. Very helpful report and very thorough report. Um, the survey analysis was done in May of 2025. So we analyzed all of our responses and took a look at those, and combining those results of the survey along with help from Francis, who joined around this time. We created the draft recommendations in the winter of 2025. Talk a little bit about the survey. The survey, um, we had several different questions, but one of the questions was, or several of the questions were about like challenges facing those working with agricultural data. The most significant by far were appropriate benefits of data sharing. This ranked um, highest by a significant amount. That really suggests that individuals are not currently receiving appropriate benefits from sharing their data. Some of the other challenges actually tied for second were power asymmetries between data producers and users and informed consent. So here it's kind of like we're up to current day with the recommendations. So we have draft recommendations created, and we're looking for feedback from you all, actually, frankly. So we'll be sharing the draft recommendations from you all. We'd hope if you have a chance to take a look over them, give us any feedback. We're very receptive to changing them. They're not in a final form at all. We are currently in the draft first round of comments based on the recommendations. Those close April 7th. Then we're giving the working group a couple weeks to take a look at those comments, consolidate them, change them, add them to the new draft. And then we'll open up April 21st. We'll open up the second round of comments. Comments for that will close May 12th. And then from there, we'll hope to circulate a pre-final version get some comments on that. We'll also send it off to the RDA Technical Advisory Board to get their comments as well. And then we're hoping to release the final recommendations in July of this year. So I can drop these into the chat maybe later. I'm sharing the slides, so it might be a little bit difficult for me to do right now. But here are some important links that might be helpful for you to have. First, I put my email. Francis, sorry if I left yours off. I should have added that. There's also a link to our RDA website working homepage. There's a draft recommendations link, and also there's session information for this because I forgot to take it off. I presented this briefly in the IGAD group as well yesterday. So now I will pass it on to the next speaker.
Alan, just I want to say thank you very much for this presentation. You were the one, together with others as well, who carried the work of this, and you did a great deal of work to create the draft recommendations, including surveys, and a lot of discussion went into this. I believe Ugochi was also part of that. Dr. Ugochi was also, and that's really a nice thing, she was a major part, and she's now a co-chair as well of the EOS Future RDA, Artificial Intelligence and Data Visitation Working Group. And she's agreed to give us a perspective here on the relationship between open science, if you want, and sovereignty. Ugochi, please, we're looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. And thank you, Alan, for the feedback and the information so far. So looking at the open science and data sovereignty as a paradox in agriculture, because agricultural data, most times people don't take it as serious as health data. And in RDA, I know we preach a lot about open science, and open science is very good, where researchers or people that need agricultural data or any other kind of data can access. It becomes a public good where you can access your any data you want and be able to use it for maybe climate action or even health, resolving health issues, or food, to enhance food security. But when we talk about data sovereignty, it's very key because most times the farmers that produce this data or that are part of that contributed to the data being out there do not benefit. Most times they don't have control. You come around, pick up the data, or they also, give you information and you go ahead and make use of it. There's no fallback to them. They don't know what happens after then most times. So the key insight here is open science surely depends on data sovereignty. It needs data sovereignty to succeed. And in that case, we'll be talking about trust, whereby the farmers would trust the researchers or those coming to get the data and have that confidence that whatever data that is being collected or is being sent out there, there won't be any breach of privacy. There won't be any. They will still be part of whatever comes out of it as in benefits. And I know we talk about FAIR principles a lot in RDA when it comes to handling data. And the framework balances, looking at FAIR, we also need to look at the CARE principles, which is more of an ethical thing. It is person focused, unlike FAIR that is data focused. So if we're looking at a situation whereby we'll have open science and we want people to be able to access data, especially agricultural data, which is what we're talking about here, we need to look at this framework, FAIR and CARE principles. They have to come together because the farmers need to have collective benefits in place whereby they will also be part of whatever that comes up, the benefits. An agri-tech company comes, takes the data set, builds an AI model that has a commercial benefits. There should be a way to come back to the farmers, especially farmers in Africa, farmers that are in low-income countries, those that don't really have voice. So we need to look at that. Next slide, please. Trish, okay, thank you. So having talked about the open science on data sovereignty, there are risks. We also having some solutions in all the articles that are being put together. And there is a new social contract, which we'll see at the end of the day. So the major risks these days is what we call the data colonialism, whereby, which I've mentioned before, agri-tech exploit open data sets to build AI models or tools that are commercially beneficial. So farmers receive little or no benefit at all. So there should be a way to give back to the farmers. Then we have the protective mechanisms, which we're looking at, whereby there will be a usage-based consent, whereby the researcher will be able to benefit, and the commercial, when there is a commercial benefit from whatever that comes out of it, everybody will benefit. And when we talk about smart contracts, which is a blockchain technology, where there will be a sort of smart contract technology implemented on whatever environment where the data sets are being shared, there will be controlled access, so that if a researcher is having access to an open access to data, the person will have controlled access. There will be a time limit. There will be a date. The person will not have access again. It will not be accessed all through the way. Then in AIDV working group, where we talk about data visitation, where we have algorithms that are secured that can help you access data without moving it, could be one protective mechanism that could be implemented. And also synthetic data, whereby we don't use the real data, we can generate synthetic data that looks exactly as the one we can get from the farmers. And that could help limit some of these risks that could lead to colonizing the data from the farmers. Then looking at the vision we are trying to implement in 2026, we're looking at a situation whereby we're shifting from data extraction to data stewardship so that everybody will feel important in the whole circle. Everybody will feel, nobody will feel cheated. We'll build digital commons where researchers access quality data, then the farmers retain their control and receive value. They will feel that they are still in charge of their data, and they will be able to give you more clean data because they feel secure, they feel they are in control. So there has to be a mechanism that will make the farmers to feel secured, and they will be able to give out their data sincerely. So I think looking at this, our data is not just meant to be open. It should be as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ugochi. I'm afraid that if I tell you this, I'll scare half the people away, but I have about 25 slides myself. But before we do that, we have really good people here, and we have the people we need. So are there any thoughts or any discussions? Dr. Ugochi, I thought just your 2 slides, they are going to say much more than I say in 25, but it's really important for us to understand this relationship between open science and sovereignty in data or the digital space. And I haven't seen anyone say this before, and maybe others can correct me here, but you wrote and you said, open science depends on sovereignty. I thought that's really interesting.
Yes, I think it depends on sovereignty because for the open science to be effective for researchers or anybody that want to access the data that is in the open science platform or wherever, the sovereignty, which has to do with the control and the access, has to be in place because the the farmer that is providing the data needs to have some sort of security, whatever is involved.
Thank you. Any thoughts about what Ugochi has said or Alan? Alan, maybe you want to comment on this too, because you've been doing this for 3 years almost now. And what do you think about what Ugochi has brought into this discussion here today?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So, for a little background, I guess I didn't properly introduce myself or really the rest of the group. So I'll do that briefly now. So my name is Alan Moss. I'm actually a Bumblebee researcher by training, and I got into working on science policy, and I became American Association for Advancement of Science. Science and Technology Policy Fellow with the United States Department of Agriculture. And with them, I've been working on a lot of issues related to open science. But one of those kind of like sub issues I've been working on is data sovereignty, indigenous data sovereignty. And a couple of years ago, I was able to help USDA with what's called a formal tribal consultation, which is a legal process. It's kind of a bilateral talk where USDA was able to talk with the leaders of tribal nations about indigenous data sovereignty kind of like issues and things like that. And I've been privileged enough to be able to participate, like, or be in the background of some of those discussions, and also like go to some conferences when it comes to that. And I'll say that like we hear a lot of the same. I've heard a lot of the same things expressed when it comes to data and data sharing. About tribes. Tribes have expressed that they want to see the benefits from sharing their data, but and they want to make sure those benefits aren't just being kind of like having people parachute in, take the data, and then parachute out, and where they lose like complete autonomy over the data that they're sharing and all the rights, and maybe they don't even know what is being done with the data. And so a lot of those have been kind of like expressed and feared, and but I think at the same time, like they have a lot of like researchers, tribal colleges that are located like in tri with tribal nations that do a lot of like really high quality research, and they're really like they really value collaborative research as well. And so I think there's a big interest in creating an ecosystem where data is created and shared, but in an ethical manner. I think there's a lot of appetite for that, even though there is a lot of hesitancy too, due to like past misdeeds.
Thank you, Alan. That ties in well. Does anybody else want to come in before we get overwhelmed by slides? And please do, because all of you have suffered through now 4 days of RDA plenary sessions, which are fantastic. But that means you've also suffered through lots and lots of slides. Lars, please. Yeah. And by the way, Lars is one of the core members of the RDA, Artificial Intelligence and Data Visitation Working Group. And in my view, one of the best philosophers of this generation. Lars.
Thank you. You're way too kind, as always. Yeah, I wanted to sort of contemplate a little bit on this that both Alan and Ugostya has brought up, which is how we make sure that the value of data doesn't dissipate from the people that are the originators of this data, the farmers themselves, especially in an industry like agriculture, where automation and AI automation is coming on a very high rise into a point where, if we so choose, humans don't actually have to be involved in any part of the agricultural process at all. You can basically machine everything from start of optimization to say final sales, if that were something that you wanted to do. And that's why this talk about ethics and how we treat this is so important, so that we don't railroad ourselves or the people, especially people that are indigenous people, or people that have a weaker voice than the sort of larger corporate kind of stronger financial voice. So I wanted to give that as a little bit of a comment as well, that as we're increasing automation, it's very easy to forget the human that is behind the data.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's critical to what we want to discuss here. And I see Clement is coming in and out. I actually was invited to speak in this other data space thing, which is really, really interesting. So I understand his concern. Also want to recognize Dr. Ronit here, Pirion, who's also a member of our AIDV working group, and who's a fantastic person and living in a difficult situation today in Israel. Very nice you're here today with us, Ronit. Yeah, thank you. I hope you stay safe. Okay, that said, any other thoughts at this moment? Okay, then I'm going to do the terrible deed, and I am going to share my slides. And but please, please, please interrupt me, stop me, tell me when it's no longer interesting, or just interrupt to talk at any point. And you don't have to put your hand up either, because firstly, we're not that many people. And secondly, likely I won't see it, or I might ignore it because I get absorbed with my own self. So just jump in anytime you can, anywhere you can here. But yeah, really under Alan's leadership and the past leadership of the RDA Ethics in Agricultural Data Working Group, draft recommendations are now existing, and you'll get a link to that in these slides here. And we put together this working group between the Ethics in Agricultural Data Working Group and UNESCO's, and the EOS Future RDA AIDV Working Group that we have some people here from. We will look at these draft recommendations a bit in terms of the recommendations as they stand by themselves, but also with regard to the UNESCO Open Science Toolkit instruments for developing data policies for times of crisis facilitated by open science. So we come back a bit to Ugochi's thing here, but also particularly with regard to crisis, because crisis is really important. In these draft recommendations, if you look at them, you'll see that this is kind of an addendum that follows onto it. So we first have the substantial recommendations themselves, and then we look at the recommendations in crisis situations there. So, so just as a kind of introduction, we wanted to take a global approach to both ethics, the ethics of data, and AI in agriculture. And just keep in mind, it's both animals, data, and AI. In my view, they're not the same. They're different. They're related, but they're different. And it's going to come up again as we go further here. Also, let me know if you cannot hear me so well, because I know my microphone is not good. So please tell me that too. Just don't be nice. Just say it. And then we have, and I think as Alan has said, and Ugochi also has further reiterated, it's to do with food security. It's to do with climate, trade, and rural development if you want, but we could just say agricultural development. It doesn't matter too much where it is. We're looking to build an ethics framework. And as Alan and Ugochi have said, to protect farmers, communities, and the environment. And I think this is a really challenging discussion because we cannot lose sight of the industry in this. And it has to be a balanced discussion as well. So I'm not sure how to do it, but I think it's important here. We also have been discussing with quite a few Africans here, not just Ugochi, but others. I'll come back to that. We want to also operationalize the UNESCO, and now they're also part of the United Nations International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development as a project within that for the data policies for times of crisis facilitated by Open Science. There's three guidance documents. I'll refer to those. And then also perhaps as we're doing this, we also need to think about the implementation of the recommendations. We don't want the recommendations just to sit on a shelf. So we need them to be, the reality of the recommendations happens when they come into discussions outside the recommendations, when they come into policies, and when they actually come into how data and AI are used within the agricultural frameworks. This is a link to the recommendations, and I don't have the slides up, but I'll get the slides to you. I think I put it also in the Whova, in one of the community posts. I put it there as well. But you can also take it here. Please go there because we're working with open authorship. So you can just go in, you can put your name, fill out your information in it, and then you can go in and help Alan and Ugochi and Lars and all of us to write these guidelines together in a good way here. So why agricultural ethics now for data and AI? Well, data has become ubiquitous. The power imbalances Ugochi and Alan already discussed. We're now also moving into the topic of agentic AI, which Lars and Ronit and others and I can't remember the names here, but others of us have discussed at least once this week, probably several times this week in several different sessions. And so we understand that this, and this, by the way, this AI, I don't know, more than data in a way, we could say, less, I don't know, but it affects everybody. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a telephone or not. It doesn't matter if the only thing you work with is a pitchfork, it's still going to affect you. It's going to affect everything about the products, the markets, and the livelihoods of everybody who's involved in anything in this world, including agriculture and food. And the problem and the challenge we have, and we've talked about this earlier this week as well, is that legal and ethical frameworks lag behind the realities of the digital space or agriculture itself. This is a huge problem. And so hopefully with these recommendations, we can also try to address that, let's say, lag there. Now, we have already fair care and trust principles, the FAIR principles for data, care principles for indigenous data, trust principles for data repositories, and now we try to develop the visions and principles for AI in societal frameworks and the pilot principles for AI machine and biological integration. And I should have put a link in here to these principles so you could work on them with us. Maybe I can add a slide afterwards, and so that when you get the slides, you can link to them. And again, you can go there and you can co-author these guidelines with us. They're quite well developed now. And I'll just say here, what we're trying to do is to frame, as RDA does, not only within, let's say, a European framework, which is very much sometimes what RDA is, but a global framework. That's not fair to say RDA is just Europeans, but a global framework, and also within the UNESCO's framework of open science, but also the UNESCO recommendation on open science, but also the United Nations Pact for the Future, which I think is a substantial and important document, and the International Science Council's Science in Times of Crises. And with regard to the UNESCO guidance documents that we developed actually 3 different guidance documents. One was a fact sheet, the other is a guidance, and the third is a checklist. And again, I should put the links in the slides. I didn't do it. But the impetus for this, the reason for this, was to try to tackle urgent and emerging crises using data policies. And this is where I want to stress that there's a lag again, because we started this in 2023, early 2023. It was before LLMs hit the world, and we were focused on data. When the LLMs hit the world, I especially, but others wanted to include AI, but people were nervous about that. So AI almost completely disappeared in these documents here. So that's a huge lag here, because these documents deal with data, but I think dealing with data without dealing with the AI is a bit past. And then also we tried to look at how they could guide in how to manage and mobilize data and their relevance to emergencies. And those guidance documents, when we talk about crises, we mean really 3 different areas. One is, shouldn't be pandemics, it should be public health emergencies. Another is disasters, and another is conflict situations. But then also, thanks to Ugochi, thanks to Lars, thanks to Ronit, and really thanks to those people and many other people, many other people, during even beginning before that, we were able to produce several publications from the EOS Future RDA AIDV working group. These are the first sets that we produced. The 4th one you see there, Ugochi was one of the principal authors on that. a really tough thing to write on securing processing environments for open science, looking at legal foundations, primarily looking at European legislation on that. But we also produced really the first global guidelines for ethics committees reviewing artificial intelligence and data visitation. The same for global guidance for informed consent. We also produced a Bill of Rights, an AI Bill of Rights, or recommendation for a Bill of Rights on that. And we have an AIDV shared citation library. And by the way, last night I also had a meeting. I'm supposed to lead the development of a chapter on AI, the only chapter on AI, if you can believe it, in a science report coming out from UNESCO. And we had a meeting with our groups there, and we discussed how we could use, because this is an excellent library that primarily Natalie Myers put together. And we really wanted to see how we could try to integrate that library now into this UNESCO chapter, which is coming out as the UNESCO science report for 2026. So these are things we're looking at here. And then Ugochi, Lars, and others went further, and they also did a specific Tiger project on trying to implement the outcomes we had here into a data visitation model with Fairlease. And that was fantastic work, led primarily by Patricia Buendia. You can see her name here. And they came up with further guidance documents. Firstly, they integrated into it the work we had done, and then they came up with further guidance documents on data visitation language for IRB review, for ethics review, on geographies of trust, where they mapped out how different kinds of, let's say, different federated and data visitation models can work. And also adding data visitation language to informed consent forms. And then also, and this is something that should have been published this week, but I haven't gotten around to putting it as a note of that yet, but how we can use data visitation to unlock biomedical data. So these are things also that can perhaps also be taken into the agricultural context here. I mentioned the envisages and pilot principles. We have, as you saw, we have the FAIR principles, we have the CARE principles, and the trust principles, all related to data. We think we also need to have principles that are related to artificial intelligence. So we have the ethics ones here. I won't go through them, but this paper is over 40 pages long, so it's something to be considered maybe. But it's work you can look at as well. And so we have a set of, let's say, societal principles, ethics, norms, values, integrity, sovereignty, access, governance, and engagement. But then we also have a set of what we call pilot principles. And really with the idea of these principles, that these principles will be integrated into AI models. So that AI models have within themselves embedded principles for ethics, for policy, for regulation. It seems like that in there. And I think if you think about these principles just very briefly, even here, purpose, integrity, lawful, open, tested, those seem to be really principles that we could integrate into AI models here. So I won't go too much further into it here, but what we try to do then, as Ugochi has done so well, is to look for, within the recommendations, a balance between sovereignty and open science, a complementary balance. Maybe we need to think further, Ugochi, too, as sovereignty being the foundation for open science or something like that. We need to think about that relationship here. And again, Ugochi has already expressed this, but rights to control, access, contests, benefit from data, and AI, as open as possible, as closed as necessary, we know that. Also, how we can use data visitation so that we don't relocate data, but we can keep data in situ, we can keep data in the place where it is and allow the code to visit the data without having to move the data. But that becomes rather complex from an ethics and legal point of view as well. And then again, seeing sovereignty and open science as mutually reinforcing here. This is the European framework. I put this here, but, and the reason I put it here is because Tuesday morning this week in Brussels, just 20 kilometers from me, they had an in-person but also online meeting from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock Brussels time on shaping Europe's trade, competitiveness, and sustainable food future. It was all about agriculture. It was a huge meeting. I'll show you who was there, some of the people who were there in a moment there. But they were looking at how Europe's agricultural sector can balance competitiveness, sustainability, resilience, food safety, and public trust. So this is a real European discussion. This is a discussion really on what will be the future of EU agri-policy beyond 2027. I can tell you it was a heated discussion. It was less friendly, let's say, than often European Brussels meetings are. It was really a lot of concerns, the kinds of concerns that are being addressed in the recommendations here. And I think those concerns are similar to the ones we have in the recommendations with regard to the governance of agricultural data and AI, fair participation in agri-food systems, high standards for regulation, and the needs to align innovation with rights, transparency, and long-term sustainability. And this is a heavy, heavy European discussion. This is not a small discussion. You know, the farmers have already shut down member states. They've shut down Brussels for a period of time and so forth. So this is a big discussion going on in Europe. And I think what we're discussing here fits in with that here. So again, this conference from Tuesday looked at the food, agri-food strategy and balance, trade negotiations, the future of what a typical European statement is, common agricultural policy beyond next year, fairness and transparency, the omnibus package, which is what's being maybe most important at stake here. I won't go into it. And then topics closely aligned to the themes of the recommendations. Again, farmer and community rights, data sovereignty, fair governance, secure and operable data spaces. All this, data spaces are huge, of course. All this comes into what we're doing in the recommendations as well here too. And just to get an idea of who was hanging out in Brussels on Tuesday this week, there were some really important people from the Commission, from the Parliament, from the leading organizations, member states, European organizations, they're not all listed here either, but that have to do with agriculture and food security. So it was an important meeting, and I think we are at a point in time with it here. I won't talk too much. It's a tiered recommendation. That's something we need to look at closely. Should we do it this way? How we implement the recommendations or something? That's part in the recommendations already. We should look at that closely there. Then we have a kind of addendum at the end, but it's rather extensive addendum to looking at agricultural data in times of crises, because crises, any crisis, a hurricane, a flood, a war, a public health emergency, monkeypox, whatever it is, it affects agriculture, it affects food. So all of these things we need to also look at with regard to data and AI and how we can use or put in place systems for data and AI that allow us to get through crisis situations with the minimum amount, let's say, of suffering and loss here too. So we also develop a checklist in that, which you can go through and look at there with regard to how we can use crisis data in governance here. And and I won't go through it all because I'm going to lose you anyway. And just in conclusion, I would say that in moving forward on this, there's not too many people here, and there have not been too many people in our working group meetings, but there will be a lot of people involved in this. Because Africa, we have very good connections through Ugochi, but also through other people, the African Open Science Platform, all these people. In fact, this morning, I was in a meeting with Africans discussing, again, this plan I'll show it to you that we have also in Africa. So there's a lot of there with Asia. We will connect, we are connected, and with Latin America and the global north, I hope so as well. So we're going to look for legitimate and sustainable governance across all actors, if you want, all sectors, how we shape the infrastructure. I think the recommendations provide a global opportunity at a time when it's really important, and also at a time when crises are enormous in the world and where crises are affecting the food supply chain. Just think of Ukraine at the moment, or Russia. This is huge. This is really, really huge. Or think of Bangladesh or India. All these crisis situations are really important. And of course, in Africa, the wars in Africa, disease in Africa, this all plays a role here. So we have a global opportunity, and we want to work towards responsible agricultural AI, crisis-ready data infrastructures, and sovereignty-centered open science. Ugochi, what do you think of that? Could we say sovereignty-centered open science? Would that work like that? And then finally, just want to say that we also started a project. I was in Nairobi in early December 2025 last year, and we had the FEES Africa conference there, where we set up the Africa Center for Capacity Development in AI. We had a meeting on that today. One of the projects that we want to do out of this is agricultural AI within this AOC-CX center here. So I think we will bring in a good place to work on this. And these are the key areas that we have in that project there. And what we're trying to do is to develop stronger protections for farmer community data and AI rights, bring in higher quality AI systems, allow institutions to be able to govern, test, and evaluate agricultural AI responsibilities, and position Africa as a global leader in sovereignty first, Ugochi, ethics-driven agricultural AI governance. Thank you for staying with me through that really difficult, exhausting presentation. Alan, could you save this group, please?
Thank you very much for that, Francis. I thought that was really informative. And so yeah, we have quite a while actually for an open discussion if folks want to talk in. But first off, does anyone have any comments about some of the things Francis was sharing about?
Yeah, hi. I think that the challenges are huge also in Europe, and I shared a paper that I wrote about North Italy, and I think that the challenge here is mainly to reduce the dimensions, because if the first step was to elaborate all the relevant dimensions, which include the green employment, all the the things you have mentioned, and methane emissions, and climate impact, also packages. I mean, any possible dimension. I try to organize everything together and to see how. I think that the main challenge here, if we're talking about responsibility in design, is to define the main dimension that can everything can relate to. Because let's say that we want to have containers. for instead of fields, because there's not enough rain and problems with infrastructure. It's all detailed in the paper. So where should the container be located? In the city or out in the outer circles? I mean, these are very concrete questions that depend on the way we organize data. The dimension we choose to put above or to structure the perspective around.
Yeah, Gochke, I agree. This is a huge challenge with the recommendations is to, if I understand correctly, to focus them correctly and to structure them around, let's say, a central theme or a set of themes that are manageable in the recommendations and don't try to do too much or more than they can. Yeah. Matthew, please.
Hi. Well, thanks so much for the presentation, and it's nice to meet you all. I'm Matt Canfield. I teach at Leiden University in the Netherlands, and I'm new to this space, so it's really interesting to see all the work that's been done. So apologies if the questions I'm asking are really basic about what the work of this working group has done. But I had two questions. One was, you talked about the FAIR and the CARE principles. And I wondered if there's been discussion within the committee about, the fact that so many smallholder farmers, of course, in lots of places of the world identify as indigenous. And also a lot of communities may identify as indigenous but are not recognized as indigenous peoples because, of course, indigeneity is more vernacular in some parts of the world than others, and sort of the questions about how to think about the CARE principles with regard to agriculture specifically, and then another set of questions just about like this, any discussion about sort of like the FAIR and CARE in the context of smallholder and peasant farming. I mean, there's no a lot of peasant groups are, of course, they may not be recognized as indigenous, but there's a lot of overlapping sets of understandings of sort of their ancestry, their practices, and how to think about specifically smallholder peasant farmer and data norms.
And those small and peasant farmers are getting, in many, if not all parts of the world, increasingly small and increasingly peasant, I would say, too, given the way the agricultural industry grows and increases its holdover. And I think kind of in a narrow, just European sense is, how is Europe going to maintain an agricultural industry or farms or whatever you want, especially, given the situation that many farmers find themselves in the Netherlands, where you are, in Belgium, in France, in Italy, everywhere. They feel that they are, the UK as well, they feel they are being squeezed out and that they are no longer, on the one hand, economically viable, but also on the other hand, they're completely dependent on large industries. We see that also, Alan can speak to that in the US, where, a farmer cannot even fix their own tractor. Because it doesn't belong to, well, they paid for it, but they just can't, if a light goes out, they're not allowed to touch it or they'll lose everything on it. So these are really big concerns. And again, go back to what Ronit said, how do we manage that in a recommendation, or are we able to manage that in a recommendation?
Yeah, I'll add that indigenous folks that I've worked with, like the kind of like the first thing that always gets like brought up in meeting is that there's not kind of there's like a great diversity in between different tribes and between indigenous peoples, and that like if you're talking to one indigenous person, they're not going to have the same concerns as like others. So to that point, however, I think it is useful to generalize smallholder farmers, and I think a lot of smallholder farmers are indigenous, and of course it like varies from like country to country and things like that. But I think by kind of like generalizing the group of smallholder farmers versus kind of like large holder farmers, I think that is a useful thing when we were thinking about these recommendations and about thinking about these rights and trying to see like where are the commonalities between indigenous and non-indigenous groups, and a lot of it came to these power asymmetries between them and larger like corporations or even researchers.
Could I ask Maria if she would like to say something? I know she said something earlier in the session I was in this week, and it was helpful. Maria?
Hello, I'm also new here, so really learning a lot at these sessions. Um, Not really much to add. I was I am really looking forward to getting your slides, Francis, because you had to go quite swiftly over them, but it seems like there's a lot of interesting stuff that came out of this European Brussels conference. So I'm really interested in digging into that. And it's so in a way um, it's a good thing that there's this overlap between the agenda, the European agenda, and what the RDA folks are focusing on. So hopefully there is going to be a chance um, to influence in some ways the developments at the European policy level, since already there's a lot of attention on these issues coming from the RDA side.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I want to say I really agree with you. There's, I think Ugochi will agree, or Renith as well, or Matthew, that there's a lot of similarities in a way between what a small farmer goes through here in Belgium. There's a farm across the street from me, and what a farmer goes through in a small village in Nigeria or in Bangladesh or something like that. There's a lot of similarities because a lot of the structures, the constructs around them are different. But again, going back to what Alan said and what Matthew also indicated, I think Ugochi will iterate as well. It's not everywhere the same either, even if there's a great deal of similarities. But the crisis, if we can call it that, the concern is definitely global. Yeah, Ugochi. Corey, did you want to comment on this? Or
Hello,
Daniel?
Francis.
Hello.
Yes, Ugochi, yeah, go ahead, please, Ugochi.
Okay, yeah, I just want to chip in something about the question Matthew asked, if I got him right. Looking at African context, Nigeria, coming down to where we are, where I am, smallholder farmers here has a different challenge, because most of our smallholder farmers are farmers that only farm for their family. Then we now have another level of smallholders farmers that farm maybe after the family, whatever remains goes to the farm, to the market. So But majority of our smallholder farmers are those that farm for the family, and most times also they are the ones we get this data from, because the last time we did something on tomato leaf disease, we found out that the farmers we met on ground are those farming majorly for themselves. The family, they will sell, not much, it's not in commercial quantity. So we have a lot of, that's the idea of smallholder farmers in Nigeria or in my own country and my community. And most times they make up 70% of the farmers we have around. The ones that do mechanized farming that Francis mentioned about, a farmer who cannot repair his tractor, there are not so many, there are fewer. So in case the policies, the conference you'll be going for in Francis, for the European policy, if that policy will include Africa or Nigeria, the policies will have to have some contests towards Africa so that the implementation will be impactful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kochi. Corey, please. Yeah,
Can you guys hear me okay?
perfectly. And you have nice blue sky behind you as well. Yeah.
Thanks for the invitation to say hello. I've been listening on audio as I just left my hotel this morning, so I'm a bit in transit. But this has been a great session for me to listen into. I recently, I've been here for the past 2 days in DC as part of the US in-person gathering for RDA, and I'm a cohort member, so I'll be in London and kind of early in my own RDA journey. But I work in agriculture and climate tech. I'm currently at UC Davis doing a graduate degree in their soil science, soil and biogeochemistry program. So my perspective is a bit different from the folks here. I've been happy to kind of keep quiet and just kind of listen and take everything in. But the angle that I'm more coming from and what I'm sort of seeing within my context at UC Davis is that there isn't a lot of data standards for how agriculture is to be shared within a research and academic community. I feel like what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of work even to just do there to make data sets between academic researchers more accessible and more front and center when people are publishing. You know, in those situations, certainly there's private landowners at play, but a lot of times it's with research farms. And so it's a different set of problems than the ones that have been kind of the center of these conversations. One thing that I will say for where the work that I've done in the past has touched a bit more and where I'll definitely take a look at the paper, the recommendations, and see if I have any thoughts or things to add is prior to going back to grad school, I've been working in the carbon removal industry. Spent a lot of time working with regenerative agriculture projects that were attempting to sell carbon credits to corporates and that kind of thing. That whole space is one of the few spaces where I think data is actually mandated because data is the product at the end of the day when you're dealing with carbon credits. So, you know, I'm very interested to learn more about what are the other contexts in which data is even being shared. Are we talking because farmers are using devices? I was hearing mention of tractors and stuff. Is it because people are using machinery and then corporates just happen to be taking all of this data from the use of their commercial products? That sounds like there's a lot of stuff I'm sure that that should be getting thought through. But yeah, an angle to the conversation that maybe I can contribute a bit more to when it comes to private landowner data is what are the appropriate ways to think about this when data is actually an essential part of an agricultural practice and a product and a good that's essentially being sold, typically in the form of, you know, co-benefits or carbon negative benefits that are kind of being packaged up. And I know a bunch of the different players in that ecosystem, the startups in that space. I can help with kind of mapping that out with folks here. and I can also help navigate some of there's some nonprofits in that sector who are explicitly working on agricultural data sharing initiatives for certain types of carbon removal pathways to support research, right? To basically get data sets from some of those field trials, even if they're from commercial field trials on private landowners, to bubble back into academic communities to help with our understanding of some of the kind of carbon benefits of those practices. So that's where I'm coming from. Early in my RDA journey, excited to be listening into this. Natalie had recommended that I tap into this call this morning because I hadn't seen anything that was ag related yet. But yeah, so thanks for the invitation to say hello.
Oh, thanks so much, Corey. I saw you guys hanging out yesterday with Natalie in a different session. So, and I know this is also a topic that Natalie could contribute a lot to as well. But wow, what you said is just amazing. I saw Alan's eyes opening up, I believe. You're not going to escape very easily after this. We're back to a bit what Ronit said about scope, about what we can manage and handle here. A lot of the people I was involved, or talking to about this in Africa, are involved in soil science, like you. Then you have other people who are more like on the food processing, the food end of the agriculture too, and everything that goes in between there. So let's say it's not a small world that we're dealing with. So Ronit is going to have to keep us on the straight and narrow, or we're going to get definitely lost. But it would be really good to do some mapping too. This would be a really good thing to do. And I think Alan has already done this also with the survey they did and so forth. But if we can do, Alan can speak to that better, but if we can build on that, that would be, I think, really, really good here. Lars, go ahead, Alan, and then Lars wants to say something too. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say Lars just has hand up. I'll quickly plug, though, the interest group on agricultural data. If you're looking for groups to get connected with, they had a talk yesterday at the same time period, actually, and that group has been active for a really long time. And this group actually kind of spun off out of that group. So if you want to get like connected to the broader RDA agricultural data community, that's a group, and I'll link that in the chat. Also, welcome
Thank
to
you.
Washington, D.C. Lars,
Yeah, no,
please
that's
go on. Oh, sorry.
no, I was going to say that's great because I had been looking at working groups, thinking I wanted something more active. But I think what I'm finding is that maybe the interest groups, if you can know which ones are currently ongoing, those are actually a bit more broad and maybe a bit more continually active. So I'll take a look at that. Thanks.
Lars, please go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, Corey, and happy to see you here. Yeah, I was thinking on the collection of data that has been used sort of as an important part. And here in Sweden, we have had some issues surrounding the last couple of years surrounding forestry data, actually, because forestry is the main agricultural industry in Sweden for reasons. But one of the main things that happened here is that there is being data shared around a specific type of bark weevil that eats lives on the trees, on the spruce and fir, and they actually reduce the value of the forest quite a lot, which means that it's actually becoming sensitive data. And that's something that we also need to think about when we're thinking about these data spaces and these data sharing that we want to push for, but that with also an open data is that since people's livelihood are dependent on this these data, we must take very good care not to inadvertently cause harm when we share. So this has been a big topic in Sweden for the last couple of years on how to sort of be able to both share the data and keep it safe as we progress through these type of questions. And I think it's something that we need to address in a group like this. I think sort of where we can find recommendations on how to treat such things, or especially when these type of leaks happens. What do we do after that? So yeah, that's what my short comment to Corey's request on other types of data, that agriculture data that is being shared, and that is of sort of where the data is the high value product. If anyone has any thoughts on that, I would be quite
Well,
happy to.
Apologies, but I just jumped into a building, so like I had to deal with the reception for a second, and I think I missed the thing of what you were saying, Lars. I don't know if there's an abbreviated version that you could repeat for me.
Yeah, but basically, pest data is highly
Test
both
or pest?
pest, like
Pest.
in different types of and it actually inadvertently went through bird data, that data, which, because the birds eat the bark weevil, and the bark weevil, by knowing where the birds are, you know where the bark weevil is, and by knowing where the bark weevil is, you know which forests are going to be valued, the value decreasing over the next coming 50 years. So yeah, there's a lot of value in this type of data, and in that data protection.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'll mention that as part of my, or actually my day job, is working with USDA on helping them write their policies for sharing data. And I've been working on open science and with like kind of the broader federal government on that. So we actually, and this has been kind of like an ongoing issue, and for actually helping people share their data and requiring them that they share their data. So we have a federal repository called Ag Data Commons. It's a generalist data repository. It's we require that all of our research data that can be shared at time of publication or at like the end of a project. And we have internal, or we're a generalist data repository, but then we also allow them to researchers to post their data to other repositories, like because we know that like NCBI and others like genomic data and stuff like have like specialist databases, repositories where they are better, but we require that our researchers submit a metadata catalog entry into our repository so that it can then point to the data. And we also require that publications be made in something we call PubAg, which is kind of like Pub Data, or which is kind of like PubMed Central, which is full text scholarly articles. So this is actually an ongoing within the federal government, the U.S. federal government. This is an ongoing concern about like sharing data, and actually pretty much every what I'm doing at USDA is paralleled with almost every other federal agency. They have their own repositories where they're requiring their scientists to start sharing it. But I'll say candidly that it's an uphill battle, and we're just kind of like the beginning of sharing data. Back when I was doing research not that long ago, sharing data was not the standard at all, and I was working with pollinator data, and just finding pollinator data that I could actually work with from other countries and other research labs was just like uh, so difficult that I quit. That I quit trying to do those like collaborative research projects because it was so difficult to do. And we're as the federal government kind of requiring this, and we're hoping that maybe like other smaller institutions will kind of like pick it up. At least that's my personal hope, that we'll set the standards for everybody at the federal government, and then everyone in the broader research community will start becoming like a standard where they share their data whenever they can. And of course, when they're sharing data more often, then these ethical concerns are going to come up more often, which is why I'm also kind of working in parallel with these like data ethics groups at the same time.
But relatively, there are many open databases in that area. in agriculture in general. So compared to social sciences, the situation is not very bad. When I was looking for data that's related to agriculture and food security and all the other related domains, I found lots of databases that looked fine and international and very well managed.
Could I ask, sorry, Ronit, I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry. Did Daniel or Trish or Latrice want to say something? I think for Takuma, it's very late and he doesn't want to disturb his family too much. But you're welcome to speak or to write something in the chat as well, Takuma. But Trish or Daniel Daniel or Latrice.
Hi everyone, it's getting, oh, can you hear me? Getting late as well.
Very
I've really
well, yes.
enjoyed this intersection of the two groups presenting. Really, I've learned a lot today and looking forward to further reading, looking at the slides and the links that are shared here. But thank you, really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you, Trish, also for facilitating this discussion and making it work in the background. It's just as important as anybody who's speaking or anybody who's participating, so it's really appreciated too. And I hope also, Trish, you can maybe help us to bring this discussion to the small audience that you have as RDA being responsible for RDA Asia, just 3/4 of the world's population. So if we could get those people in too, that would be great. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there are so many themes that will resonate with this audience. And you know, my role is really to help introductions. And so, you know, ag, AI, care principles, indigenous data, there's so much going on in this part of the world that, you know, just making the connection will be such a positive thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Any other reflections here? I see that Latrice is on a train, and that's called dedication. Corey, please. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that link to the USDA Ag Data Commons. I'm curious, is there currently any ongoing work on trying to make the metadata for those data sets more accessible or extracting kind of standardized and semantic metadata? That's a particular research interest of mine. And if that's something that you all are thinking about with that project, maybe just as a side note, I'd love to engage in conversations around that, either through RDA or outside of that.
Oh yeah,
Cool.
So this is actually done through, we have 5 national libraries in the federal government, and I'm here with the National Agricultural Library, and we have a whole librarian that just works on agri-semantics with things like that. So we have some metadata standards, and we are ongoing trying to improve them and automate things wherever we can, and to make it as interoperable and shareable as possible.
Cool. I see this is separate from all of I'm just coming from a soil science perspective, from all the Surgo and that like world of data sets from USDA, like the Kellogg Soil Lab data, the soil survey. Or does that get integrated into this in some way?
Toby Kellogg?
Just the USDA soil survey.
Mm.
There's a bunch of different names for it. SSURGO.
Right. That's a different part of USDA than I'm familiar with, so I'm afraid I can't speak to that.
Well,
Um,
maybe interesting semantic overlap there though, because it's basically like a regular soil survey that the USDA runs, which is I guess adjacent to ag, but also in some ways Venn diagram sort of overlapping.
yeah, thanks for the questions. I think one of the kind of cool things is that we have such a diversity of folks that are interested in these like issues. You know, I'm with the federal government or working with the federal government, but we also have people, many from nonprofits. We have researchers like you, like Corey here, and others. And we've also, through the work of the working group, we've had members from industry come and participate, especially like early on. They talk about like some of the concerns. So there's a lot of different folks here that have kind of overlapping concerns, and it's been nice. One of the reasons we put out the survey was to get as many perspectives as possible, and we encourage like a diversity of perspectives for that. So if anyone would like to continue working with the or would like to work with the working group, I guess I'll plug it now since we're at kind of like the top of the hour now. So we meet monthly. I forget, I think it's the first or second Tuesday of the month. If you go to the working group page or if you email me, I can give you a link to that. If you haven't had a chance yet, we dropped some links to the recommendations document. Feel free to leave comments on that, to kind of read over things, leave comments on that. If you'd like to participate more of the working group, I can get you access to some of our group files. You can take a look at our survey that we put out and some of our like survey summaries. You can look at the landscape report that was done by Tiger, RDA Tiger, that did landscape kind of like analysis that was done like almost a year ago. It's not fresh in my mind, but it was very, very thorough. And that one really has the perspective of like all the different folks working on these um, as well. Yeah, Francis, did you have anything else? Right at the end, so.
No, I wanted to thank Takuma for coming by. I saw he put something in the chat as well. I think it's well past midnight now for him in Japan, so that's rather heroic. But also, Takuma, I think this is one of the things that's really great about RDA is there's a lot of different topics, a lot of different areas where you can just drop in on, and you can see if there's something interesting for you. And hopefully, Alan and Goche have piqued your interest for this working group because we need a lot of help. So that would be great. But thank you for being with us, and thank you to everyone for being with us. And I'll go back to Ugochi and Alan to close this out. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Links are in the chat. I'll drop all the links into the collaborative notes document as well. If you haven't had a chance to open up the collaborative notes, please drop your like name and contact information into that. As I'll be sure to use that for like some future communications as well. I might send you an email, you all that participate today, an email with some of like the links, important links I dropped earlier today as well. Trish, is there anything else as our RDA rep?
No, only that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in this plenary week. It has been a marathon, an incredible, 24-hour. I think we're looking forward to the weekend and having a good crash. But
I
do
think,
keep the conversations going.
yeah, I think Ugochi
Francis.
also wanted. Apologies to speak. I think Ugochi also
Yes.
wanted to say something before we go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I also want to say thank you, just like others, for this session and also the opportunity to speak. But I also want to add something for all we're all doing. Please, let's be very cautious about bias and inclusivity in our data sets. because it's very key, it's very important. I'm a university lecturer. We go online and get these data sets to do one research or the other that will impact the society. Most times you see that the data set is biased, but we need these data sets that can affect our community, to develop tools that can impact positively to our community. So whenever we're developing this or getting these data sets that we put out there, let's try and make it more inclusive. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Trish, could you drop those collaborative notes again for Corey as well, so that we can get him signed up and chained to this project? Yeah. Alan, back to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Get some rest. I know it's a long day for a lot of you and a long week for all of you. And please stay in touch. We'd really love to hear from you all and continue the conversation at future RDAs and potentially future working group meetings. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye, see you.
Bye. Bye.
Alan, please send a short email with the links and things, and I'll respond to that. I would love to be more involved in this group. Agricultural data is something that's near and dear to my heart since I got my PhD at the Agricultural University. So
Yeah. Did you share your email into the collaborative notes?
yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. Okay.
I'm basically at the top. I think I'm the second person. I think it's Trish and then it's me. Yeah. So
Thank you for being so active. I'll be sure to do that. I'll send you that email with all the important links and information so that you can join
thanks.
future
Awesome.
conversations, and you can get all the group files as well. We've been keeping those. Great.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Lars.
Great.
Bye, Trish.
Thanks, Alan.